How to get access to all the funds you need to invest in property in just 8 weeks. By the way, all you need is to own your own home. Let's cover the basics of how you can access that capital that allowed me to build over 100 properties in my portfolio in the last 10 years. Let's get cracking. So where does the money come from? Well, first off, when people think about investing in property, one of the biggest obstacles is getting the money. Most assume you need to save for years or wait for a windfall, but that's not always the case. Here's one of the most powerful tools that a lot of people overlook: remortgaging or refinancing. If you already own a property, maybe that's a buy-to-let or your personal home, you could actually access some of the equity tied up in it by remortgaging or refinancing. And what this essentially is getting a new mortgage on the property at the higher value, paying money into your bank tax-free so that you can start building that portfolio. So here's a quick breakdown of how the process looks like. Step 1, get your property valued. If the value of the property has gone up since you bought it, you've probably got equity in the property. And just so we are clear on what equity is, the value of the property minus the debt or the mortgage, and whatever's left is how much value you could potentially pull out. Let me give an example. 400k property, £200,000 mortgage, 200,000 in equity that we can start to utilize. Step number 2, speak to a mortgage broker or a lender to explore remortgage options. And I'd actually do a bit of both, by the way. The most natural thing to do is talk to who is already lending you money and see what options they can do to help, and you absolutely should. However, talk to a qualified mortgage broker that might be able to open up some more options that you didn't know was available. Step number 3, refinance your mortgage. Based on the new value, releasing equity, and boom, you've got capital to invest. Now, let me be clear, this isn't about racking up loads of debt. I know we've grown up fearing the credit card. We don't want to be irresponsible about this, but you need to understand there's a big difference between the good debt and bad debt. And if you already own a property, we want to take advantage of this debt to invest it in your portfolio. Big difference. If done right, this process can take 6 to 8 weeks from start to finish, and ultimately you could get your starting capital sorted. Remortgaging is essentially a financial reshuffle. It's utilizing the value that you hold in an asset, pulling it out as cash, and then redistributing that into more assets that are going to pay you on a monthly basis. So it's not about taking on more bad debt, it's about utilizing that debt to grow. And by the way, millionaires and billionaires do this all the time. On this channel, I get people going, if you're so rich, why are you in so much debt? And by the way, I'm in over £20 million of debt. Terrifying, right? But the individual with the most debt in the world is Elon Musk. The richest person in the world is Elon Musk. And it's because of utilizing other people's money, in this case the bank, it's going to allow you to accelerate and put that debt or equity to work. Now, property values in the UK have been steadily rising over the past decade. In fact, it's been measured since the Doomsday Book in 1066, and that's almost 1,000 years of evidence of raising prices, and that's to do with inflation on bricks, wood, labour, everything that comes in, and of course the natural supply versus demand in the UK specifically. So as the values go up, your equity position increases whilst the debt position stays the same or decreases. And what this essentially means is that many homeowners, just like you, are sitting on untapped potential without even realizing it until now. So if you've owned your home or a buy-to-let for a few years, you might be sitting on tens of thousands, or in some cases, hundreds of thousands of pounds that you can get access to without lifting a finger. Let me give you an example of how this works. So let's say we've got this house here. We bought it 5 years ago for 180 grand, and you've paid off a chunk of a mortgage, because if you live in it, more than likely you're paying it down on a repayment basis. And the market has been your friend. 5 years later, it's now worth 250 grand, and you've still got around 120,000 to pay off on the mortgage. Not bad, that's 130 equity. So let's do some maths. So you live in your house. It's £250,000, and we don't want to take debt out for no reason, and we don't want to over leverage. So let's say we get an 80% loan to value. You can actually take up more, up to like 90%, but let's keep nice and safe. So we're going to pull out 200,000, which is 80% of the £250,000. But hold on, Jamie, I've already got a mortgage of 120. Well, this is why it's called remortgage. You don't get the 200k, the debt comes in, and then part of it pays off the existing mortgage. So out of that 200,000, remember we already had 120, so that old 120 grand mortgage gets paid off. You're now left with £80,000. Where does it go? It goes in your bank account. So by remortgaging up to 80% loan to value, you can pull out £80,000 minus any fees, adjustments, etc. obviously. And that's more than enough to use that as a deposit to get started on your boring vanilla buy-to-let property journey, or even a couple of smaller deals if you're smart about it. And here's the thing, you haven't lost that money. You simply removed it from there, translated it from equity to cash that you can now deploy. And it's down to you to be bloody smart of it. We've moved it from the walls of your house into cash in the bank so that you can build more bricks and mortar into your assets. And this is how property investors scale. If you think about, even in my situation, all I've done is that again and again and again. But instead of doing it on my one property that I owned and bought 2 properties, a few years later I then did it again on all 3 properties and bought more property. A few years later I bought 5 properties, and you scale and scale, and obviously as I build up my businesses I deploy it again and again and again. This is what smart property investors do. So we can use that 80k for a 25 deposit on a 320 grand property, or what I would do is probably split that across a couple of 130, 140 grand properties that I can then aggressively reinvest. That's 2 rental incomes, 2 capital growth, 2 mortgages, and ultimately the opportunity to scale my wealth aggressively and safely. And the important thing is, if you're moving your money from a static asset, the property, into an income generating one, is that you take advantage of that cash flow and reinvest it as you go along. So how do we execute on this? So you're probably thinking, all right, this sounds decent. Hopefully you've got the home to deal with, but what do I actually need to do? Well, here's a 3-step action plan. Number 1, check the property's current value. You want to use an online tool or speak to an estate agent to get an accurate idea. Personally, I really like using LENDLORD for this. I'll put a link in the description. Go on there, fill in your details. It's completely free, by the way. And what you can do is you submit it and you work out what your property's even worth. And you can do this with the online immediate instant valuation, which is automated, or you can book in a call and with one of their brokers. So that's number 1. The reason you do that is you're working out the equity. So you're going to take your current mortgage away from the property's value. Then you're going to jump on LENDLORD or another platform, but I prefer LENDLORD, to run through the numbers and see what deals you could do with the released capital. Now, the reason you want to use a platform, you still talk to mortgage brokers if you like, is everything's in one place. And I'm quite a visual individual. I like to know what's available to me. So here's where it gets even easier. Use a platform that does it all. And yes, I am pitching LENDLORD to you. It costs you nothing. I don't get paid if you use this, but click on the link, fill in your details, and not only can you assess your value, you can also get your finance in place, understand the numbers, and actually it can match you with investment opportunities all in one place without taking a penny out of your pocket. So why would you sit on so much equity? People have this obsession in the UK and the US especially with paying off the mortgage, and it's this really proud thing. But actually, it's not what the smart investor does. And if you're watching this channel in particular, you want to be a smart investor. Now, utilize that equity. Don't leave it as dead weight. Get it invested in an asset class that pays you every single month. And if you're really interested in accelerating this, click the link below, go on LENDLORD and see what's available to you so that you can make smart decisions moving forward. I hope this has been valuable. By the way, give me some feedback on what you think about of LENDLORD. I really use it in my portfolio. I hope you get as much value as I do. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.